I think our welfare state is broken. I think it's massively in need of reform. And I say that not as a sort of, because my driving force is to save money. I just think it fails people.
Norman Lamb, I think you are unique because I think you are the only person I have ever met who can remember the first thing I ever said to them.
Yeah, well, it's probably because you were quite rude, I think.
Remind me.
So it was like the day after I'd been elected, and I was sort of obviously full of excitement and thinking this was just amazing. And I came on to Look East.
Live.
And you said something like, well, this is a giant leap for Norman Lamb, but it's a pretty small step for the rest of us, isn't it?
I don't think that's what I think I said. So is this a big day for Norman Lamb or a big day for the Liberal Party?
Well, do they still have the record? It would be very interesting to go back and look at it. Anyway, I felt ever so slightly deflated.
Oh, did you?
But I forgave you. It was,
I suppose that you would have said that it was a big day for both of you. And now you may look back and wonder whether that was right.
Well, no, I wouldn't overstate how significant it was. It was obviously very significant for me. I'd spent 11 years, for goodness sake, trying to win the seat. And
as a Liberal Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, there hadn't been an elected Liberal in Norfolk since, I think, the 1930s. On Look East that night, they played Life is a Roller Coaster by that Irish boy band.
Yes.
Because during the count, it was very, very close. And at one point, it looked like I was 15 votes behind David Pryor. So for about half an hour, I thought I'd spent 11 years of my life getting within 15 votes of becoming a member of Parliament failing.
David Pryor was part of the big Norfolk presence as well.
He was.
So was life in politics ever, I mean, you wanted to be an MP so much. Was it what you hoped for?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. There were
including time in coalition?
Well, there were, yeah. Actually, the time as a minister was the best experience of all, because you actually felt you could do something.
Yeah.
And I was, I mean, it was quite an experience, that coalition government, because to start with, so in the coalition agreement was reached, I think on a Tuesday after the election on the previous Thursday. Then there's the whole issue of appointing members of the cabinet and other ministers. And I sort of waited and waited.
You got left out. Is it right that he forgot?
Well, I think he might have forgotten. But he rang me about 3 days later and said, we want to offer you the role of International Development Minister, the most sort of junior role in that department. And he said, it's not what I'd have wanted, but I hope you'd be happy with it. And I said, yeah, I'd be happy with it. I felt disappointed, but I also thought that international development would be really interesting. And so he said, the Prime Minister will call you this evening. So I waited and the phone didn't ring. And eventually then our chief whip rang and said, don't worry, you'll get a call tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, make contact with the department and arrange to meet the permanent secretary, the head civil servant. And so I rang the permanent secretary at 8 the next morning. She knew nothing about my appointment, which of course set alarm bells ringing. I then had a call from Nick, not through the number 10 switchboard, which is how my first call came through. Nick Clegg.
Yeah.
And so the call was to say, I'm sorry, we've made an awful mistake. I can't offer you the job that I talked to you about yesterday. And I was standing in our garden swearing loudly at the Deputy Prime Minister, very angry, because I thought it was pretty awful treatment. Yes. And then, they tried to sort of make amends in some way. I ended up becoming the chief political and parliamentary advisor to NIG, at least in title. Also a government whip, a job that I hated. I'm interested in policy. I'm not interested in discipline particularly. Not that I'm ill-disciplined, but I just wasn't interested in enforcing discipline on others. And so for the first 2 years, it was a bit sort of irritating not to have a role. I attended cabinet every week, which was fascinating, but I was an observer, not a participant, and that was frustrating.
The Liberal Party didn't, although you were in power and actually probably did some good things, you lost MPs at the next election.
Well, it almost destroyed the party. And it's an interesting thing because a lot of people look back and say it was a disaster.
But you were in power.
We were in power. We were doing things. I'm proud, particularly of my work in mental health.
Yeah.
I would never have had the opportunity to do that had I not been part of that coalition government. And I, it's interesting. I was just looking at the data the other day. Actually, in the last 2 years of the coalition, we had growth of 2-3% a year. Compare that to now and to the whole period ever since. So I think it was a remarkably stable government. There were obviously big tensions. We were in coalition with a party that we fundamentally disagreed with on lots of things.
And yet you got things done.
We got things done.
And it was student loans.
And student loans was a disaster and a massive self-inflicted wound by us. And it was a massive lesson because we made this ridiculous pledge never to increase fees. It was the sort of pledge that I think opposition parties make, parties that never think they're going to be in government.
Yeah.
And of course, that was our mindset because we'd been out of government since the Second World War. So you sort of say things that you sort of believe in, but you don't think you're ever going to have to implement.
Well, I want to come back to politics just a little bit later on, only about the state of the world as it is today, which seems to be pretty messy. But one of the things I really want to talk to you about is mental health. Now, I was reading a really scary statistic the other day. 2016, just after you'd left government, the figure for the number of children who were getting send notifications has gone up from 2016 to now by 30%.
So
what's going on?
This is special educational needs. So it encompasses mental health, but other things as well. Well, there has been a steep rise in the number of children and young people in particular. Interestingly, it starts long before the pandemic, often blamed for the problem. Started about 2012-13. Interestingly, there's an American psychologist called Jonathan Haidt who's written a book called The Anxious Generation. Now, this is contested territory. People disagree about it. But his contention is that two things have happened. First of all, parents generally, and this is a big generalization, but across the sort of developed world, have become more fearful of allowing their children to play outside, in the local park or in the woods or in the alleyway. We're scared, frightened of bad people around, so we don't let our eyes off our children. But he says that you learn through play, through making mistakes, through adventures, and restricting children's freedom so much, totally understandable from the parents' perspective, but actually it's doing a lot of damage. And so, children aren't learning as they used to through free play. And so he says parents have become far too cautious about play in the real world, but far certainly not cautious enough about the risks in the virtual world.
Kemi Badenoch says you can learn how to get a day off work with mental illness by watching a video. Do you not think that some people say, perhaps the work ethic, especially if you're in a job that you don't like very much, is different? Do you think it's changed?
I mean, there will always be some people who prefer to be off work than to work. What's interesting is that our country has far worse sort of sickness absence and unemployment due to mental ill health as the label than most other countries. Now, I don't think our country is uniquely lazy, but I do think our society, our community is fractured. And I do think that there are real issues that people face. How we define it or describe it is different. And I also, incidentally, feel very strongly that work is good for us.
Yeah.
As someone who's worked ridiculously hard for most of my career, I'm not someone who's in favour of laziness. But I do want to understand why people aren't working.
But you see, you've said something which I think is interesting. Is the mental health of the people in this country worse than it is in other countries? Or do other countries have a better attitude to people who say that they have a mental health problem when really they're just perhaps...
Yeah, so I think
I mean there must be something in that figure if we've got one of the worst records.
So there may well be features of our welfare system. I think our welfare state is broken.
Yeah.
I think it's massively in need of reform, and I say that not as a sort of because my driving force is to save money. I just think it fails people. A woman called Hilary Cottam, who's an author who is a sort of social reformer, says that the welfare state catches us when we fall, but it doesn't lift us up. And I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. So people get caught in...
But isn't that what the welfare state was there for, to catch us when we fall? It was never there to build us up, was it?
Well, but it's not good enough, is it? I mean,
well, how do you... I mean,
do we really want to just trap people in dependency? It's all... I mean, the worst thing of all is it leads to an awful life. And then you can see generations of... we know that if you're brought up by a parent... who has significant mental health challenges, there is a risk that you yourself then experience it, and it goes from generation to generation.
Okay, so
this is not a good life.
No, so what is the answer then? Nobody's going to pump loads and loads of money into the welfare system, are they? I mean,
no. I think routes to getting people into work is really important, and I don't think we focus nearly enough on that.
With respect, and
that doesn't always mean with respect.
Yeah, but with respect, say, it's very easy for politicians, going back to your old job, yes, to say let's help people get into work.
Yeah,
it's another thing altogether to do it, and some people are saying you have to make them do it by saying you won't get your benefit if you don't go into work. So is that the answer?
Well, I have no difficulty with a system that really encourages people to get a job and or to do training or whatever it might be, and for that to be expected of people. I think that's not an unreasonable thing at all. And I think that often we're not interested enough in how dismal life can be if you have a life on benefits. We are failing people miserably by just accepting that.
I can see people listening to this saying, "Oh, come on, he's just a soft old lefty who wants to pay people to sit at home and do nothing."
It's precisely the opposite. I absolutely don't want to pay people to stay at home to do nothing. I want people to be active and because with employment brings self-respect and dignity.
But jobs are going because of AI and things like that. People.
So there's going to be we're only at the very start of this next revolution, and we have to sort of prepare ourselves for a society where jobs, employment may be much more difficult to come by. And it's going to hit all sorts of professional groups, lawyers, accountants and so forth.
You can't help people into work if the jobs aren't there.
No, but I mean, the jobs are there at the moment, certainly, and come back to the point I made earlier, that we are failing compared to most other European countries with the number of young people who are out of work, particularly because of mental ill health, and it's not acceptable.
So you've just written a book about mental health in general, specifically.
Yeah, I have. I mean, it will be called Be More Human, because I think the system is awful. And I have 4 sort of key arguments. First, we completely failed to prevent the things that lead to poor mental health, particularly damage to children in early age. The incidence of sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, and so forth. And there are evidence-based approaches that we could apply, but we failed to do so. So that's my first point. We failed to prevent ill health, and we know it's happening, and we do nothing about it. The second point is that we rely too heavily on antidepressants. If you look at the prescribing of antidepressants across the country, it's been rocketing, just keeps going up and up. Is it having any positive effect on the health of the nation? I don't see it. And it's massively related to poverty. So the prescribing of antidepressants is much higher in the poorest communities. I think that's deeply distressing and concerning for all of us, that we sort of don't deal with the causes of poverty, but we just put people onto medication. I think we fail those communities horrendously. The third insight is that for very many people, mental health goes with physical health. A high proportion of people who experience poor mental health also have physical health problems. They're often closely related, and yet we treat them completely separately. We don't treat people holistically at all. And then the fourth and final insight is that when people are in crisis, our default is to lock people up in ever-increasing numbers in the most dismal places. I don't know whether you've ever been onto a mental health ward, Stewart, but they are awful places.
If they don't go into mental health wards, they go into prison. A very large proportion of the people in prison on any given day have a mental health problem.
And that in itself is a separate scandal. And it's often people who've been excluded from school, put onto the scrap heap, and the sort of conveyor belt through to the criminal justice system is totally clear. It's again another example of how we fail to prevent these awful things happening. But locking 18 men or 18 women together in a confined space with very little access to the outside world. I don't know about you, but for me, access to nature and beauty is something that keeps me sane, and yet we deny it to the sickest people. So in all of these ways, I think our system is just awful, and it fails. The sort of the outcomes, as they call it in the health system, in the mental health service are pretty awful. And nothing ever changes. And the suicide rate, I lost my own sister, my oldest sister, in 2015 to suicide. So this is personal for me. And in a way, that experience set me off on a journey to find better approaches to mental distress and ill health. And what you find is there are places around the world and even around this country that just do it so much better. A great example is Trieste in northern Italy, where it's just a much more human approach. And it's interestingly, going back to our previous conversation, there's a massive focus on getting people into employment because they know that it gives us that dignity. And they spend less on their mental health system than we do. And they achieve vastly better results for people. So my my argument in this book is it's an inhuman system. It's like from the Victorian era, nothing much has changed. There are wonderful people working in the mental health system, but they are failed by an out-of-date system, and we could change it. It doesn't cost more money. We could just be more human, as I say in the title of the book, and it's out next September. So get your copy, Stewart.
Let's go back to politics very quickly. You're probably happier with the leader of your party now than...
Well, I'm not a member of any political party.
Okay, all right. Leader of the Liberal Democrats than you have been with any of the previous leaders?
Oh, my sort of hero was Paddy Ashdown. I mean,
I mean in recent times.
Well, I was close to Vince. I got on very well with Vince Cable. Actually, we had a very similar view about Europe, and we've had a long discussion since then. And he wrote to me a couple of Christmases ago. He sent me a Christmas card. This is the former leader of the party who abstained on key votes about which I was talking about during that whole debate. And he said to me, "You were right." And he said he put
in a Christmas card.
In a Christmas card. So I sort of
all right.
That meant quite a bit.
So Ed Davey isn't.
No, Ed was a friend. We were close in politics, and
so did you?
And I think the party is doing quite well. I want greater clarity about what it stands for.
Yeah,
and I do think that all parties of the sort of progressive centre and centre left have to demonstrate to people that we can solve the challenges that society faces. And my anxiety is that if we fail to demonstrate that we can lead to better lives for people, then people will default to the extremes.
So did you applaud when he didn't go to the dinner for Donald Trump?
Well, I agreed with that judgment, yeah. I mean, I do understand that in government, you have to deal with governments of all persuasions, including governments that you don't agree with. But I have a particular problem with the horror of what's going on in America at the moment.
So you're not a big fan of the Trump administration?
No, I'm not. And I think there's a massive question as to whether democracy survives, both in the United States and beyond. There are a lot of business associates surrounding Donald Trump that I think stand to benefit substantially from his administration and from the decisions internationally. I mean, just look at the proposals for Gaza that he came out with early on about creating this sort of resort on the Gaza Strip, putting to one side the interests of the people who live there. Look at what's happening with Ukraine and Russia and the talk of business opportunities for American tycoons once there is a settlement with Russia. In my view, it appears on Russia's terms. So, no, and the sort of the way in which vulnerable people are picked on in America, particularly this ICE operation where if you're an undocumented migrant, you're picked up off the streets and you may have been living and paying taxes and being a good citizen for many years there, and suddenly you're picked up and taken off. So this sort of stuff is... Do you worry, though,
with the feeling about immigration here, that we could get to that kind of situation? I mean,
yes,
forced deportation seems to be even on a Labour Party agenda.
What I completely accept is that the sort of daily film clips of hundreds of migrants coming across the channel in boats that aren't safe is the sort of most visible demonstration of government not working. And so I completely accept you have to sort that. You have to demonstrate that government is capable of sorting it. And if you don't, then it does usher in, I think, the extremes. And then you have a sort of public acceptance of pretty inhuman treatment of people who maybe fleeing persecution and all sorts.
And democracy under threat.
I really mean that. Yeah, I do. I think it's. So I suppose the way I would put it is, if you've got a government that is trying to confront the big challenges that we face, whether it's the functioning of public services like the NHS, which is in an awful state, whether it's the whole challenge of an ageing society and how we fund our public services, whether it's climate change and so forth. But if you're a government trying to come up with big solutions to these challenges that we face, but you've got up against you some sort of populist who's offering sort of peddling easy solutions to very complex problems, can you ever convince the public of those difficult challenges and being willing to take difficult decisions? I'm not sure in an age of misinformation and social media that becomes possible, and I worry that the risk of us defaulting to something far worse is very real, and that's why I've found myself so frustrated with this government. I've been willing them to succeed. I putting party politics to one side, I want an effective government that confronts these challenges, and it feels to me like the solutions on offer are too small for the scale of the challenges we face.
One word answer: do you miss politics?
So I wouldn't.
I know better than to ask you for a one-word answer.
Yeah, sorry. I don't regret for 1 minute doing it. It was an amazing experience, that 18 years. I'm not sure I'd do it again now, because I think the environment, the hostility is so much worse than it was in those days.
And are you depressed at the thought of what happens in the next 10 years here?
I'm really worried, and I'm sort of desperate for inspired leadership, willing to confront these big issues that we face. And at the moment, I'm not seeing it. I know many of the people in the cabinet and across Parliament, and I had pretty good relations with people across Parliament. And that was sort of, in a way, the way I tried to do my work. I tried to reach across party boundaries to find solutions. But do we have people in politics now who are willing to lead and to confront in a serious way these big challenges, and to take the nation with them on a journey, in the belief that there are solutions, there is a way to the sunlit uplands, but we have to believe in it, and we have to somehow rebuild trust in our politicians as well.
Norman Lamb, thank you.
Pleasure.
Well, that's it. Thanks for watching the podcast. If you've enjoyed it, then please press subscribe. Our thanks as well to our sponsors, Help Alert. If you'd like to try Help Alert free for 14 days, you can do so by contacting helpalert24.co.uk. If you're worried about somebody in your family falling over and not being able to get help, or if you're worried about it yourself, then please get in touch. Help Alert is available 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. If you need somebody, they'll be there. It could save your life.